Okay, so I've just been asked how to change the non-switch element with attached thermistor. So I've just grabbed a scrap pair of Mk5s, but the process will be the same for a lot of the other models as well. First thing I'm going to do is pop off the hinge caps. They often break. If they do, then you can just put a little dab of super glue either side of the broken piece of plastic and then reassemble. Just hold in place for a couple of seconds and that will hold the hinge cap in place. So you have two screws. You need to hold and twist both. So two screwdrivers. And that will come out. If it's particularly stiff, you can use a mechanic's impact driver. So hinge pin is left there, and with a small screwdriver just poke it out like that. Pull these apart. At this point you can just remove this hinge pin, push the nylon sleeve out and lift out the metal. Notice the orientation, the longer tab goes down and towards the switch. Screwdriver, undo the two screws holding the switch side arm cover on. We've got outer brown wires, thermal fuse, inner wires are the element. Grab a multimeter, put it on a low ohms reading and check the two outer brown wires. In this case they're open circuit, the thermal fuse has failed. Go to the inner two wires, check. We've got a reading of 73 ohms. That means the element has cracked on this side, allowing this side to carry on heating up because this side stays cold, and eventually the thermal fuse does its job by going open circuit and rendering the ions dead. So a little piece of silicone out of there, 4 screws, screwdriver, take the complete assembly out, just move those to the side. So that's the thermal fuse in the middle, it's held underneath that spring clip. You do not need to take this apart. I've seen hundreds of these been damaged over the years. People try and prise up the metal spring clip and break that, they prise the plastic off. There's a lot of ways to make a complete mess of this. Actually, all you need to do is get some very sharp side cutters, slightly push the thermal fuse to the side or to the other end, get in there and just literally cut the two wires, and then you can pull them out the other end and then just reach in, grab one of the cut wires and simply lift the thermal fuse out and dispose of that. If you've ordered a new thermal fuse from us, you will be getting the correct value, 227 degrees. You'll find most other companies supply a much higher 240 degree thermal fuse, and I think I've seen some companies offering 229 degrees. 227 is the correct thermal fuse. It should be coated with Kapton tape on 3 sides, and the non-covered side goes against the ceramic element. Right, so there is a little figure 8 silicone piece of rubber in there that these wires need to go through. Get a piece of thickish wire and just put a loop in it. Feed it into the end and out the other side, and now you can just put one of these little eyelets through your hook and just gently pull it back through the silicone rubber. Same the other side, feed your wire through the silicone rubber, oil it over the wire and gently pull it back in. Now, with a little bit of slack here in the wire, without pulling them back through, just lift this up, tuck it down, and underneath the metal spring clip and slide it into place. Gently pull on these wires and you will find that that sits down nicely back where it should be, and that is the correct and easiest way to take these apart, to get the thermal fuse apart, which is what we're covering with this video, and the non-switch element. That can simply go back in. These wires are longer than the original, so you just tuck them in and fold it over into a slight loop. Oops, wrong screwdriver. Where has that gone? There it is. Grab your screw and we're going to do the thermal fuse, then an element wire, another element wire, fold the slightly longer cable in two and pop in that last screw. So it looks like that. Hopefully that's nice and clear. You must put these silicone pieces back in. I see hundreds of repairs every day, and even professional companies leave these pieces of silicone out. Do not do that. They are all there for a reason. Now in our case we can now reassemble this side. Just make sure the wires don't get trapped anywhere and pop the cover back on. There we go. That is in place, and just grab your two screws and do that up. No need to over tighten anything. You'll possibly see that the ceramic plate is, there's a bit of a gap at one end. If that's the case, you just put your hand over it. I've got a sticky glove, and you can just slightly wiggle. Yeah, see that gap's gone there. If I push and squeeze again, that gap can come back. So just move the ceramic plate so there is an equal gap either end. So that is that side done. Spin over and remove the two screws on the non-switch side. What we normally do here, well, what we do every time, is we replace resistor R8 and R11 on every pair that come in. You may or may not be doing that. In this case we're concentrating on the thermal fuse and the element. In this case the element has broken. You may have a thermistor that's faulty, and that might cause overheating with thermal fuse failure, or the irons might just be sat there bleeping with a faulty thermistor. So we already know that this element is cracked, or at least one of the wires is snapped. I'm not sure which until we get it apart. Remove the two screws with a soldering iron up to around 350. Just dab. You can see the solder points. Two thin wires going to those solder points. You just need a tiny amount of solder, just enough to wet the joint. Do it on both sides. There we go. And with some tweezers, just grip the thin wires and then heat it both up, and they will literally pull out like that. Lift out the assembly. In this case we'll remove these two silicone pieces so they don't go flying off. We're going to pull the wires. Yep, there is a broken wire. It's literally fatigue has broken the wire off of the eyelet from years of just the element moving up and down. I repair these, you won't be doing that. Now, you might think that will just slide apart, but it won't. There is a a metal spring clip in there holding everything together. So, easiest way, just in there, get a small flat bladed screwdriver and tuck it underneath there. So hopefully you can see, and just prise that up just till you hear it free off a bit. Spin this round, slide the plastic down until you can see, can't do this upside down, that bit there. Tuck the screwdriver underneath and just lift up. If you have got both ends free, then this whole assembly will slide off. Might need a little bit of jiggling around. You might have to go back, or you might just have to gently push the element out. You'll work it out. It's simple enough. And then the whole lot comes out. The plastic mount, spring clip, broken element or faulty thermistor. That lot can go into the bin. So at this point, I'm going to use a used element with thermistor, if I can find one. Don't want to waste a brand new one. So you can imagine this is a brand new element with thermistor. What it will look like when you get it is like that. I apply these thermistors myself with some very expensive T-Core 75S silicon glue, and the thermistor wires will have been bared and pre-soldered for you, ready to go, but we're going to use a genuine used component. You will have no doubt bought a sachet of thermal paste, and just tear that open, pop the thermal paste on here, and with a finger or finger in a glove just smear it on. Obviously we don't want to use a sachet every repair we do, so we use Dowsil 340. The sachet that you'll have purchased is slightly different. It's a grey colour, but it performs the same purpose. Very thin, smooth coating on there. Now make sure that you've made a note of which way round the element as the ceramic plate came out. If you've got a scratch at one end that wasn't causing you any problems, and you fit it so it goes back in, and the scratch is at the other end, it may cause problems. So it's best to try and keep everything exactly as it was. In this case, the wear that you can see on this plate is at the tip, towards the tip, so I know the wires have got to go in this way round. Often you'll see a bit of residue. See that white line there? That's just a bit of residue where the end of the element has been sat for years. To bed this in, fingers, give it a really good push and slide, trying to get an even coating between the element and the ceramic plate. Now take the spring clip, should be Captain tape on there, and that end goes away from the wires. Sometimes these clips will be a bit loose. There's 6 little spring tabs here. You can get a flat screwdriver and tuck it under each one and just twist it up a little bit so the metal is raised up a bit. Same with this end. If it's sloppy, just grab some pliers, bend it in a little bit, pop it over the assembly like that, tuck one side in, and then try and press with your fingers down on the other side. If you can't manage to get it in, just run a screwdriver down and then just make sure that is in correctly like so, and we're nearly done. Next stage, grab that little piece of silicone which I've just chucked in the bin by mistake. There's a little figure of 8, so that's exactly the same as we just poked the wires through on the other side. That needs to go over the wires here. one element wire, and both thermistor wires go through one hole, and the other element wire goes through the other hole. Push it up into that position. The hole here is off center, obviously. This end is where the wires are. In fact, it doesn't really matter too much on this side, but it would matter the other side because the thermal fuse has to stick in through, up through this hole. This side not so important, but so again, click over one side, you'll have a big gap the other, and press down. There you go. These are available if you break them or they're melted from overheating. Pop in the silicon pieces. Pop that in. Put the screws in. Now the wires on these original thermistors are very, very thin, and you can pop the wires back through the circuit board. The wires on the replacement elements with thermistor are thicker, and in that case all you need to do is solder the wires, just lay them across flat onto these little contacts. If that's focusing, come on, focus. I think it's probably focused. So you'll see two solder pads, just lay the wires over the top and solder into place. Now these very fine ones need the old glasses off, and a little bit of fiddling. Just apply some heat, push the wire through. There we go, that's one. Much easier with the new ones that you just lay across the top. Just hold for a few seconds, and that's done. Again, critical, put the silicon back in. It goes in that channel and covers all of the wires like that. In this case, that's all we're doing. Like I said earlier, we would change those resistors as well. And at that point, you can pop the screws back in. Please don't fire these up with the covers off. There's obviously live mains at voltages present, and yeah. Normally this cable would be changed, but this is only for demo purposes. We're going to make sure that it's off, plug it in, and we are just checking for heat. There's heat that side, and there's heat that side. For us here in the workshop, we will now apply a low mass K-type thermocouple between the plates, and we'll monitor the temperature rise, already up to 150. We don't want to see a very quick rise, and that is that temperature bleep, and we're just waiting for it to settle, and we've got 184, 185. And that's perfect. A few degrees either side of 186 is what we expect on this particular model, and we're good to go. So yeah, that's it. Assembling the hinge again on all of the 4s, the later 4s, the Type 2 4s and these Mark 5s. Tab forward and down towards the switch, and press it in. Press it around so the holes line up, and then take your nylon insert and feed it through. At this point you can bring up the other arm like that, squeeze together, shut and squeeze. You'll find that sort of spring loaded at that point with the hinge pin. Again, try and line the holes up by moving it around and pop that in. Now if you get stuck and it hasn't gone fully through, push it on, put your finger on it, put it on the bench, and on the other side just wiggle that around a little bit. like so, and then eventually that will come through the other side. There should be a washer and the screw. Often the washers get misplaced. Not critical. If the washer's missing, it doesn't matter too much, and you can do it up. Sometimes you can just do it a little nip by hand. Other times you need the 2 screwdrivers. Just a little nip like that, and pretty much done. Hinge caps, there's a short one, there's a long one. Short one into the hole that's got it's a blind hole. Hopefully you can see that. There's one that goes all the way through into the body, top one, and a blind one at the bottom. If one of these tabs has broken off, as I mentioned, a little drop of super glue either side. Pop it back in place, just hold it for a few seconds, and we are done. So that is how to, really just to show you how to change the non-switch side element with attached thermistor, but we've also covered the thermal fuse as well. So I hope that was useful.